have one thing? No, I haven't. She's saying it. Our final. I know it's all over the choice. That one I have. There's no essay, so. I don't think so. I have referred to, but I think ours is our final. And we haven't learned today. We'll do that.
All right, 6:33. We will go ahead and call this meeting to order. We have a presentation from the Graduate Assistants United, the president of the union that represents all graduate assistants on the campus, and Will Coxon is here to do a presentation on the rights of those that are employed as graduate assistants. First order of business does, I would entertain a motion to adopt the agenda for this evening and approval of the previous meeting's minutes.
Motion.
So a motion, is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. All right, seeing none opposed, motion passes. Thank you all. With that, I will turn it over to our Graduate Assistants United president, Will Coxon, and let's see, hopefully all technology cooperates.
Yeah. It better cooperate because I don't have this memorized by any means. So Clay introduced me already, but I'm Will Coxon, president of Graduate Assistants United. I'm just going to go over some of the rights from the contract. If you've been to these kinds of presentations before, not a ton has changed, but some has. So I'm going to try to get through them kind of quickly so that we can have questions at the end. But if there's something that I say that you think you're going to have a question about, just jot it down, and then we can talk about it later on. We can come back to the slide that it's on. So I just want to give a quick note that this is just a quick guide to some of the basics of the contract. It's not a full analysis. Certain points are skipped, and this presentation should not be understood to be the union's definitive interpretation of the collective bargaining agreement. So GAU was formed in 2006, and it represents all graduate assistants, TAs, RAs, and GAs with appointments. Not all graduate students, just to be clear. So if you are a graduate student who does not have an assistantship or a job on campus that you get tuition waivers for, etc., we do not represent you. But we represent about 1,100 people. Whether or not GAU represents someone is determined by their classification. Those who are part of the group that we represent are called our bargaining unit. So GAU is part of the Illinois Education Association, or IEA, which is also part of the National Education Association, or NEA. The IEA NEA also represents faculty, tenure and non-tenure track, and civil servants at SIU as well. So we have 4 different unions on this campus. So we also have this link. I don't know if I can click on this and come back to it. Is that possible or no? Not so much?
It is.
Well, I don't know. I'm not good at technology. So, but basically, there's on our website, gau.org, you can go to this. There's a link there that shows the entirety of our contract. And Clay, you said you are going to share a PDF of this, right? So you can also type that in and it'll just take you straight to our contract as well. So this, the ability for us to have a union here stems from a 1984, the Illinois Education Labor Relations Act. So it requires administration to bargain in good faith with unions and not retaliate, and that's kind of a big deal. And the IELRA also set up the Illinois Education Labor Relations Board. This is not where the union goes for arbitration. Okay, so that's just some like history. So talking about some articles, some things that might be useful for you to know. Article 5.1 in the contract. Article 5 is about appointment terms. So 5.1 says that the administration shall publicly post administrative assistantship positions. 5.2 says that each department shall have guidelines for assigning assistantships and appointments, and that they shall not be made in an arbitrary manner. This one might be fascinating to some of you. You might have questions about that, because I know from my own experience and from talking to other folks on campus that that's not always the case. Again, feel free to ask questions at the end. 5.3, most appointments will be at least a semester long. FTEs, your contracts can range from 0.25 to 0.75, and a GA can have an FTE of 1.0 during intersection Intersession. So basically what that's saying is that you'll either teach one class or two classes most of the time. You can't get up to 3 or have an additional assistantship. So like Diana, can I use you as an example? Or Lindy, you don't have 75, right? Lindy has 75. Can you tell us what your 3 assistantships are?
Well, so I have this one, which is the position in GPSC full-time.
20, so 0.25.
Yeah, 0.25, and then I have a 0.5 or a half-time assistantship in Associate Chancellor University's office where I did the training that I mentioned before, and so I got approval to be at 75.
Right, there you go. So you are allowed those, but also at the same time, it does have to be something that is negotiated with your advisors in your department and whoever else is hiring. So the way we like to say it is you're allowed that, but you're not guaranteed that right. 5.3, 5.4, the administration makes an offer letter with multiple years of funding. The GA will get that funding. So if you get an offer letter to join a department that says you will have at least 3 years of funding, you're definitely guaranteed that 3 years. You will know by May 1st or December 1st, depending on the semester, if you have an appointment again. 5.5.1, GAs must take 8 credit hours to have an assistantship and 3 hours in the summer. And this one is kind of like something that I just had to deal with recently because I wasn't sure how this worked. So if you are all but dissertation, you or master's students in your last semester working on your thesis, you only have to take 6 credit hours. So please don't take more credit hours than you actually have to by your contract. That's an important one. 5.8, GA shall have a notice of appointment, which includes an appointment title, stipend amount, duration, FTE, and general hours of work at a specific work assignment. And then, yeah, so FTE, full-time equivalent. All GA assignments are made in terms of full-time equivalent, FTE. Full-time is equal to 40 hours a week, and so a 0.25 FTE is 10 hours a week, and 0.5 is 20 hours a week. You will often hear this called 25% or 50%. So in other words, if you have a 50% assistantship, you should be working 20 hours a week. If you have a 25% assistantship, you should be working 10 hours a week. And if you have a 75% assistantship, you should be working 55? How's that work? Numbers. I'm bad at math. 30. 10. Right, 10. I can't even add 10s. I mean, I'm in the liberal arts, okay? Okay, Article 6, management rights. The administration cites management rights more than any other article in the contract. They will often pretend that it gives them unlimited rights to do whatever that they want to do. But in reality, it only gives them the rights to do things if it doesn't violate any other article in the contract. So this one's in there just basically to say, like, if you ever think that the administration or even faculty are trying to cite management rights in an issue that you're bringing up, always come back to the contract and talk to us. So FTE hours are averaged over the semester, so that means that, like, if you have a week where you don't necessarily work full 20 hours, that's okay. And if you have a week that you do work over 20 hours, that's okay, as long as it's averaged out. But you may be asked to do overwork. So some of you may have encountered this already, where you are working consistently over your 20 hours a week for a 50% assistantship. If that's the case, you should report that, but you must report it within 14 days of you becoming aware of that issue. And then what happens is we meet with the board, you and us would meet with the board to discuss the possibilities, and the matter must be resolved by the board within 5 calendar days after the meeting. So if there's ever a change to your workload, so that should be adjusted to you to no increase of your time. Bless you, Diana. Moving on, Article 12. Some of you read. So GAs will have access to office-based supplies. You should not have to pay for instructional materials. So if someone is asking you to pay for your own syllabus or markers for a whiteboard or erasers or anything like that, that is against our contract. 12.4, the administration can help international students seek a visa for a GA appointment. 12.6, which we already talked about in the IELRA as well, it means no retaliation, so that's a big one. And 12.7 talks about non-discrimination. Our hires are considered equal opportunity and affirmative action, but you can also file this through like GPSC and SAU policy as well. Article 13, salary and benefits. So GAU gets 2 representatives to the committee about health insurance. Currently, we have 1 person serving on that committee. We are looking for someone else, so if you're interested, especially if you're someone who maybe has had some issues this year with health insurance. We would love to have your insight. So talk to me. I'm going to be here the entire rest of the meeting. I will have packets for you to sign up for the union if you're not currently a member, and also to ask more questions if we run out of time. All GAs are eligible for a short-term $600 interest-free loan. So if you do that, that could come in handy. Is there somebody in here who's done that before? Who's done that loan? Okay, I was going to see if you could talk about the process, if that's all right. 13.4. GAs get tuition waivers, including the summer without an appointment, up to 9 credits. This does not include Juris Doctorate, LM, or MDs. GAs can elect to get checks over 12 months. So if you're currently getting your paychecks for just the 9 months that you're working, you can fill out paperwork and send it to HR, or you can just go on the HR website and elect to get your paycheck spread out over the course of 12 months. That's a really big helpful thing that didn't happen until 2014. So that means that you can actually get paid over the summer even when you're not working. So therefore you can actually eat over the summer. That can be really helpful. Yeah.
I jump in just because we have law students in the room.
Yeah.
So we recently revised our contract because of a grievance that was won by a law student that was had dual enrollment. So both law students but also had an assistantship in the business school. And so they actually, if you're in the business school, you should, because you're a GA in that sense, they at first did not want to give them a tuition waiver, but then we thought that, well, they are a GA under the graduate school. So if you are dual enrolled, you won't get the tuition waiver for the law degree, you will get it for the other one. Does that make sense? So if that's something that you've ever thought about or seeking or want to seek out, then you would qualify for tuition waiver on that end.
Yeah.
So I feel like I read the contract recently, but I can't remember what the answer to this question is. But like, I actually tried to get the 12 months, and they told me I couldn't because the type of assistantship I had. Is that accurate?
No.
So no matter what assistantship I have, the GI should be able to get.
You have a research assistantship, right?
Yes.
And yeah, you should be able to do that.
Now,
We'll talk. We'll try.
that was like what?
Add it to the list, girl.
I know.
Okay. So, Article 15. So this is important. This is something that actually just kind of got cleared up between a conversation I had with Delilah recently. So teaching, research, and administrative assistants, GAs, who are on 12-month appointments, get 12 vacation days a year. So a day a month, basically, throughout the year. But it's only administrative assistant GAs. So you can ask the grad school or the person who's hired you or whatever to like what your assistantship falls under. And if it happens to fall under administrative assistant, even if you're only on a 9-month contract, that's still considered a fiscal contract, which means that you still accrue vacation days. So if you're on 9 months, you get still a day per month that you work. So that's 9 days that you get over the year. And then, but in that case, you're still going to be asked to report potentially to work during times when class is not in session, but the university is open. GAs get sick leave at the rate of 1 day a month, and you do not have to make those days up. GAs get 3 days of bereavement leave. Okay, so those are the big ones. Now here's some like various important articles. So Article 7, GAs have academic freedom to run your class and express your views. That one can get dicey sometimes, but generally speaking, it's in our contract that says that you don't have to pretend to be something other than what you are. You don't have to pretend to not be political. You don't pretend to not have opinions, all of that. It's actually in our contract, which is pretty cool. Article 9, if not given an evaluation, a GA should be considered to have met expectations and been evaluated. So raise your hand if you get evaluated at the end of every year or semester by your department. We do.
By the department or by the student?
By department, by your supervisor or chair. Your job. All people in comp studies do. Cool. If for some reason you weren't to get that, you automatically get to say that I'm doing satisfactory work because it's in our contract that you're supposed to do that. Article 11 says that GAs can have other employment on campus, other GA positions, or off campus. So that's part of the reason why Lydia is able to have 75% assistantship because of this article. If you wanted to get a job at Schnucks or the Hangar or whatever, you're allowed to do that based on this article. But you also can get jobs on campus too that are not student work positions. So some people run into issues with this. I will say that based on other campus policies, there is supposed to be a conversation that you have with your advisor about these kinds of things. But your advisor can't really tell you no, especially if you've been evaluated and said that you have been making satisfactory progress and that you're doing a good job. They really can't tell you no that you can't because of what's in our contract.
Excuse me, is
Yeah.
that also applicable to international students?
If you have a work visa,
Okay,
yeah.
but as a student visa, it doesn't.
As a student visa, no.
Okay.
Yeah, you have to have the proper work visas.
Okay.
But it does mean all GAs if you have a visa.
And are we talking about the visa or work permit authorization?
Work, like the work part of the work visa.
Yeah, because I might be on a student visa, but I do have work permit authorization for another visa.
Yeah.
That's the case, I know someone who is going through that, so that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, as long as you have the permits to work in America. I don't know what that visa is specifically.
Okay.
As long as you have permits to work in America, you should be able to work if you are GA. Does that answer your question?
I think I might be not clear, but I was saying, my friend came on a student visa.
Sure.
But then he got work permit authorization for another visa, and he is still keeping his student visa.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, those are questions that are more for the international student office and for administration than for what we cover, because we don't do anything with visas in our contract. But as long as you have all that documentation that you need, then we would cover your right to work. Article 17 says that you can check your personnel file. Article 25, this is one of the new ones. So you all will receive, if you're a GA, $100 on your bursar bill every fall and spring semester, not in the summer. If you are enrolled and have an assistantship and are paying fees. Grievances. You are all lucky if you are in this room regularly to know our grievance officer, Diana McGrean. She's really great at that. So we have a grievance procedure, and basically our grievance procedure is how we enforce the contract if the administration does not follow it or anybody doesn't follow it. GAU can file a grievance on its own, so on behalf of the union, but it usually does so for an employee, but we can also do group grievances as well. So if you and a bunch of people in your department are facing the same issue, we can file a grievance on behalf of all of you. The grievance process is multi-step. The key thing to remember is that we have to file within 42 days of whatever happened. So you only have 42 days of the initial incident to file. After that, the union has to respond within 15 days after the administration responds for the later steps. If the problem is ongoing, so for example, not being paid properly, we can file after 42 days. Otherwise, the administration can just not pay. And the union can demand information as part of this process. And at the end of this process, the union and the administration go before a neutral arbitrator from outside of SIU. Aldo Magone is our current IEA representative. He's from physiology. He was a retired professor of physiology. He was a grievance officer on the faculty association, the faculty union, and he would be the person who would deal with that. ULP versus grievances. The union can file grievances if the administration violates the CBA, so the contract. If the administration violates the IELRA, that is such a hard one to say, then the IEA can file an unfair labor practice on behalf of GAU with the labor board. The most common violation is the administration not bargaining in good faith. Be aware that GAU members can also be represented by IEA on other legal matters related to employment. For example, if they're discriminated against. This is not a ULP though, this is just a regular lawsuit. So this is another thing, we can file grievances based on past practice. So there is no more convoluted concept of grievances though, but if you think you have a past practice issue, contact the grievance officer / Diana, and we can try to talk about those things. So past practices, grievances are when the administration changes the way it operates in a way that adversely affects an employee. This is not a rule in the contract though, and that's why it gets a little convoluted. So in order to file a grievance that is past practice, it has to be consistent. If there are any cases that are different than what we are arguing is the practice, then we don't really have a case. It needs to be known by both sides. It can't be something that a couple of employees were doing without the administration knowing. And it has to not contradict the contract as well. They're very difficult to win. We just didn't win one recently, but that's okay. We kind of knew we were going to not. 7 tests of just cause. So GAs can be disciplined for just cause. That is a legal standard. There is no definitive way to write these 7 tests, but these 7 standards are universally recognized. So I'll just let you read those. The employee adequately warned, employer's rule reasonable, managed to investigate, was the investigation fair, did the investigation produce substantial evidence, rules are penalties applied, penalty reasonable. Questions from anyone? Let's take a lot of like, oh, boom, boom, here's the stuff. Yeah.
So for the number of the credits that as a GA you have to hold, is it standard in the US universities to have 8 or 9? Or it can vary from one university to another university?
I have no idea about that. I've only ever gone to this university. So, I mean, are you asking that, like, do you think this is great? I'm not sure, like, what you're trying to get at with that question.
So, I mean, in the at SIU, I should have a minimum of 8 credits.
Correct.
But what I know, I have one of my friends in Urbana-Champaign, and the minimum credits are 6 credits.
Okay.
So what I was asking is, can you guys advocate for lower minimum credits, or that's like?
That's, I mean, that's a question that I think that I can at least look into.
Okay, please.
Sure. Other questions?
I think I can help answer that one, that it is just based on canvas.
Well, yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me, but he's asking, is it something we can argue?
You can open
I'm
it
gonna
up to bargain.
talk about it, yeah.
You guys also bargain for assistance who are actually communicating?
I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
Can you also, let me, can y'all bargain for grad assistance to get this? Like, we'll pay for them.
Trust me, I wish I had a sticker. I'm always trying to like go to Anthony Hall and park it forever away. Anyway.
I mean, I would like also to support the same idea, because I have one of my friends who is doing his PhD at Weaver University, and they do have any PhD student, no matter if you are a TAGA or just a student, you get the blue sticker.
Sure. So here's an exciting thing, and I don't know how long y'all are going to be around, but we just extended our contract until the summer of 2021. But at that point, we will be bargaining the contract again. So if there are things that you want to be a part of that process, start getting more involved in the union. And then by getting more involved in the union and serving on these committees, which we also have a committee for parking as well. We have a committee for parking as well, if you're interested. By serving on these committees and getting involved and possibly being part of that bargaining process, or even building up to that bargaining process, these things may be things that you can discuss in that. So.
Yeah, one of the aspects that I would like to join the union since I came to SIU, but I mean, it seems, at least that's my understanding, the email that we get, like for any gatherings, I think out of meetings, would be at the bar.
Yeah, we're actually changing that. Yes, so that's great. It's a financial issue, what really to be completely honest. But we are actually in the works of reworking our yearly schedule. And I have to get this approved by the DC on Thursday this week. But right now we're toying with, in the spring, doing some, like an event on campus with some like, documentary screenings, potentially having like someone cater, leading up to our general body meetings and stuff like that. So less stuff at bars.
Yeah, because
I can't, like, I'm not gonna do those days because I still have to get those over at DC on Thursday, but.
Yeah, because I was talking to a friend and we were talking about that like 2 years ago, but we thought it's only at the bar, and we have like some restrictions. and we would like to attend or join, but
Yes.
it was
Yeah.
more focused.
Yeah, Brett created the happy hours back when he was first working here as a way to try to get recruits, and we're still gonna have some of those because it's a great way to connect with folks, but we're only gonna probably have a couple a year that are just regular old happy hours at the bar, and we're starting to move more toward a mixture of things, so I think.
So I ask you a question, just clarification, so you said you have restrictions?
Yeah.
So like, we've had meetings when we're at restaurants that serve alcohol. So is that a limitation as well?
I mean, if going
Like, can there be no alcohol present
oh,
whatsoever?
no, if going like to a restaurant where they are serving, that would be okay.
Okay.
We tend to have our general body meetings, like at restaurants that also serve alcohol, but we usually provide some food too.
Yeah, because I mean, just going for the bar, I mean, that might.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure, because you mentioned restrictions, so to make sure that was like no alcohol whatsoever, or with that restriction. So if it was just a bar, that makes sense.
Thank you for the question.
Any other questions? Yeah.
So I know a lot of departments on campus might not know that we have you. Is there someone who can be involved in our department with the, those students in our department?
Good question, OJ. Why don't you talk about your experience being a steward so far?
Each department in the university gets a steward in the union, and the steward would help keep the union updated on, or I'm sorry, keep the department updated on what the union's doing, keep the union updated on what the department's doing, and if there are any problems in the department, you bring it to the steward, and then they can help you through the process.
Yeah. The steward's main job too, and like we are trying to rebuild our stewards council right now because the chief steward last year had like a lot of personal issues happen and things kind of fell apart. So we're just really trying to rebuild that body right now. The steward's main job also is like activism and visibility on campus. That's the #1 job of the stewards, and to try to get people to come to meetings and sign up and become members, right? So if you are interested in the union, you're passionate about the union, becoming a steward is a really great way. And if you're interested in activism too, being visible and that sort of thing, it's a really, really great way to not only connect your department to the union, but also connect the union to the larger community. Other things? Okay, I will be, like I said, I'm gonna stay for the rest of the meeting. I have forms. If you're not currently a member of the union, it's just a 2-page form you have to fill out. I'm happy to talk to you and answer more questions if you have them as well. Yeah, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Yeah.
All right, well. Very good. And so everyone should have got the PDF for the presentation that we just saw with the meeting reminder itself. And so the link in that PDF from the slideshow to the contract itself will actually, it should be active. So even in the PDF, you will be able to click that. If you have any additional questions, as Anna said, be here until the end of the meeting, as well as reach out to the contact information in the presentation, or even us, we help you connect. The next item that we have, well, actually, I wanted to make sure the agenda is up there by the sign-in sheet, also the sign-in sheet. If you didn't get to that at the beginning of the meeting. And we have a printout of some of the statements for the search for a provost, vice chancellor for academic affairs, response from the chancellor, as well as some others that were distributed on campus in response to that ongoing search. That is on our old business for tonight. And the next order of business that we have is time for speakers from the floor. Set aside 10 minutes for anyone that had anything to bring from the floor.
I'm gonna have OJ assist me with this. I'm gonna be passing out these cards. It is for Spike Out Hunger, but I'm gonna have OJ explain what that is as I do the passing.
Right, so Swipe Out Hunger is, don't do the wellness center, and it's paid for by the degree. What happened is earlier in the semester, they asked students in the dining halls to donate some of their guest swipes. So each student who pays for the past, I don't know if it's for the year or for the semester, but they get 6 guest swipes so people can come in. They are donating those to this fund, and you can go to the Saluki food pantry and sign up and get 3 of those swipes that you can use at any point for the rest of the semester. Put onto your ID, so you don't have anything else. But also you can go to the food pantry and get food to cover the rest of the month because it is only the 3 swipes. Hopefully at some point in the semester or through this thing, they'll be able to give all of their swipes because most of them aren't used to people. But if you go to Saluki Food Pantry, you can get that, and they're working, I think, on the first week that they were offering them, a third of the ones that they were able to get earlier in the semester were already given them. And a majority of those go to grad students because they're good ones. I also have more information too, if you have any questions about the process, I can go through that with you, or on how to help them get more swipes later.
So if you know someone who could use those swipes, that's where this card will come in handy to kind of let them know a little bit more about the program.
Sir.
I'd like to invite everyone. I've been working on this since May. But the Board of Trustees is having the 3rd annual Diversity Excellence Lecture and Award, which will be on Wednesday, December 4th, and which is also the same day as the board meetings. So Wednesday, December 4th and Wednesday, December 5th, will all be here. This event will be in this room. I put some flyers over there, but I've been working on it. We got the honorable Dr. Charles Bentley, who spoke at graduation, this past graduation ceremony this past May. And I get that opportunity, yes, but you got this is going to be open, right? And I'd like some flyers and get that opportunity, what is it, 2 weeks? Yeah. It's food. There's a ton of food. Food and catering or for the dinner, but then outside over there will be like hors d'oeuvres and wine and whatnot.
Catering, what is this?
You would have to get that invited. Yeah, that invite, yeah.
Sorry, I just heard food back here.
An electronic copy of this should be in that all-in-one flyers PDF that's attached to the meeting reminder. If you want one individually, I have that. I can get that to you quickly, or you can reach out to Trustee Lockett. You said you were leaving some hard copies for it?
Yeah, right there. Right there. So thank you.
Any additional business from the floor? Yes.
One quick thing, new student program is hiring, getting ready to hire orientation leaders, so if you guys are have interactions with undergraduate students that you guys think are good, there's a nomination form that's going out, and we'll like you can nominate your students, and then we'll send them out a link to the application, and there's like choices on how they can know that you choose that they know that you nominated them, like do all special stuff, and they apply, and they get hired, it's great, really good students, please be working with good students all summer. So yeah.
Where do you go for that? Sorry.
Yes, that is page 1 on the all-in-one of the promos. I included the copy of the email that Bethany had sent me, and I believe, but I can't remember exactly if I included the PDF of the actual nomination application materials, but I did download it, so if you wanted that specifically, you can reach out, or there is the link in that email itself.
And if you don't want to go through the process of nominating students, don't worry, the application is live, just send us to the student programs website.
Anything else for the floor? All right, seeing nothing else, we'll move forward to old business. All right. Okay, the one piece that we have for old business was a continuing matter on the search for a provost and vice chancellor for academic affairs. Stand up, make it easier to deal with this stuff. Communicated our statement to the chancellor. The chancellor responded to that. You should have all been included in the. You should have all received the included statement that we received from the chancellor. I also printed out that hard copy with that and some statements from the IEA and the resolution from the faculty senate from the previous faculty senate meeting last week. So, after we communicated our statement, we also got a little blurb on that statement in the Daily Egyptian. Had Dave Johnson, professor at the university, president of the Faculty Association, also reach out with our activity on that statement. And some others definitely took interest in that statement insofar as not derivative, but definitely in a combined effort with the faculty senate itself taking on a resolution for that matter. But with the response to our statement specifically, to try and give a little bit of recap of that, in general, what I saw in the response that we received from Chancellor Dunn is there more or less, first point being, in response to our first point, even you remember we had those two key points, being that the policy is essentially being followed, is what he communicated back. And then the second point, being that essentially whatever negatives exist for the timing of the search and other contextual factors, and then in his judgment, they are outweighed by the positives for finalizing the vice chancellor division, essentially by finalizing someone for that position of vice chancellor for academic affairs and provost at the current moment in time. And so essentially the statement that those policies are being followed, one, and that while there are negatives, they are outweighed by the positives associated with finalizing someone in the position for vice chancellor for academic affairs and provost at this time. And that additional rationale is provided there in his statement that you should all have. We have a further statement from the IEA and the faculty senate resolution, echoing what are, again, those same concerns many, including ourselves, have had, and calling for essentially the search to not continue forward with what has been revealed as a single candidate for that position. And hopefully you were all aware, and I know that a number of you were at the student forum that was held today, along with the other forums for faculty and staff on campus for Dr. Komaraju, the one applicant for that position. So at 5:45 this evening, we did have a student forum, which was well attended. That was a large room full of students over there in the Student Services Building to hear of the candidate or Dr. Komaraju's vision and a discussion of the elements of what makes her qualified for that position and how she would take that position forward. And that is where the issue stands. I communicated that response from Chancellor Dunn to you all, I believe it was a day or two after I formally received it in response. It might have been the same day. Sorry, with the way being on the conference, I didn't gather that time specifically. And then I shared with the executive board, we had a little bit of discussion, again, having some discussion with some other campus leaders in addition to that, and then being aware of the additional press coverage, which in the report that I submitted for the council, I had a number of news article links that hopefully have kept everyone up to date on how things have evolved with that, various statements that have gone forward, and the news of Dr. Roger being the one applicant and candidate for that position under consideration. Where we settled in some of the discussion with the executive board is that essentially trying to get in a debate on the details and the legalities of whether or not a policy is being followed by the letter of what is in there, or even to some degree the intent of what is there. It's not necessarily a productive track to go down, one in which very well likely we would not be well equipped to conduct, and certainly wanted to fit the imperatives associated with the timeliness of the ongoing matter, and the other being how best to go forward as far as evaluating the current interim chancellor's judgment versus the judgment and concerns of our council. And that is sort of where, as an executive board, we fell, is that we don't feel like the response that we got necessarily addresses the concerns that this council deliberated on at some length, but we were unsure of exactly, or I guess it was undetermined exactly how to proceed. In all, what I would say is the biggest thing that we found concerning is that it continues to trend for something that's been going on for a number of years at this point, at least long enough that I've been here that it feels like a number of years, and perhaps it's been longer, that various constituencies, not limited to students, but certainly students, and particularly I would say graduate and professional students, feel as though as a stakeholder at the university that our input isn't necessarily given much weight or much credence in the conversation, and this just continues that feeling and that problem, for lack of a better word. And so that kind of takes me through items A and B on this agenda item. I'll stop there if there's any questions or discussion or. Yes.
Firstly, I was hoping I could attend the meeting, but I ended up having a meeting from 6 at the same time, so I couldn't make it. And I was wondering, so from people who attended the meeting, how was the meeting? How was it feel? Was it like a lot of questions, tense questions for the candidate, or it sounded more easy? Because I remember like from 2 or 3 years when we had the chancellor's candidates, and for one of the candidates, there were like a lot of questions, and even when you get into that room, you feel the tension in the room. And I was wondering how was the meeting with the candidate? Did it go like easy and nice? People were in a way or another asking questions, but they were okay, or there was like a general, if I would call it anger now for the candidate.
I think Bethany was responsible.
Yeah, I was going to open it up for someone else to respond. Yeah.
So for the faculty, was this morning, Carbondale, surprisingly enough, there is very few questions or response and comments from them during the forum. Maybe they were something like either, but it was very, she said what she said. There was a few questions, and then that was.
I will say that Dave Johnson did make a prediction of that, that people would have the fear of her in the group, that she'd be the only candidate, so why would they rock the vote? And he, say anything in an open forum then that anything that would come would probably be through anonymous letters or feedback in that way, because the reality of her potentially getting the job, like why would you shoot yourself in the foot or not get hired in your department because you decided to talk to the board?
In both forums, there was a question about, like, because of all the controversy around the process of if you are to be hired, how would you combat that? So in both, that was addressed in the faculty forum. That was the most like question, for lack of a better word. But for the students, it was very much so they were not afraid to voice their opinions. We had to cut them off because she did have to go to, she had something scheduled at 7, that's why we had her 5:45 to 6:45, and she's essentially like, she don't play her. There was, they had a lot of questions, they talked about, things that were happening currently, things that they weren't satisfied with, a lot of different questions. They weren't necessarily softball. There were some that were just kind of like standardish, but no, I was really happy to see one, the turnout of the students, and two, the fact that they were like, and this needs to happen. And then she did say that if she were to be hired, that she would want more contact students, she'd be happy to have that.
I mean, do you feel the questions were well handled by the candidate, or it was like those generic answers where you cannot like grab an answer from what the person said? How do you feel? Was it like real answers and responses, or were the generic ones?
For the questions that required that weren't at all complicated, she answered like very directly. But for anything that had any sort of depth to it, it wasn't straightforward, or she kept referencing the same things.
I'd also like to add that, kind of going back to the question I mentioned, I think this is where from your answer, but there was like a lot of confusion. It was getting to going back to what you said, like some big answers that were more robust and more down particularly on diversity. She was like kind of either like dodgy or various like answer the first words like vague. She wasn't going into much detail when they were asking for more detail. It wasn't really progressing beyond that, and there we saw it.
Yeah. So, do you think that would have been a little bit different if we had like many candidates in that position, or it's because is it the person themselves, or is it because I don't have anyone to compete against? So, even to answer the question, not to answer the question, I'm getting the position. That's at least what I assume.
I would say that it has more to do with who she was talking to. You don't necessarily have to answer students. You should, but they don't. A lot of administration doesn't answer students, especially undergraduate students, because they're just seen as the children of the university. And so it can be very dismissive in tone and in nature. And so it's, well, when you start off the answer to a question as well, it's multi-layered and kind of complicated. We're all at an institution understand the basis of how it works. We're asking you certain questions, and we all are earning degrees or have them already. So please answer them truthfully. It's my feeling, but not all administrators see that.
Would add to that, things were like basically questions circled around tuition and finance, the enrollment and sort of recruitment aspects for things going forward. Definitely diversity was one of the ones. And then a lot of emphasis on implementation and specific examples of things that are being undertaken to do things like make sure the financing of the university is good and that we aren't going to charge too much for tuition. And how we are improving enrollment and programs and what kinds of initiatives we're actually doing to create the diverse university and student and or faculty staff that we want. And so there was a lot of interest, a lot of engagement, very interrogative in the sense of, well, so you're in this position now, well, what are the things that you actually are doing to do these? I would say that one of the things that I thought was interesting about it was that it wasn't like some interviews in the past where there is a clear presentation of the vision and the proposal for the candidate in the position. That we did get a sense of who the person was as far as an overview of the bio and some discussion of how the candidate sees the position, but not necessarily a coherent or a like formally presented or proposed sort of plan or vision for the position itself. More of taking it to the questions at that point to go through the discussion of things. And in that way, it sort of transitions to the third item that I have on this agenda for thinking about where we can go as it relates to this position, and I'll leave it to the council to consider. But one of the things I did think was frustrating for the forum itself was a lot of the questions I felt like are things that anyone that comes to USG and or GPSC meetings or is active within the union or is active in some other form of student organizations that take on some kind of shared governance or leadership role on campus, those are things that students already know. And a lot of the questions that were asked are things that our organizations and similar organizations to those student leadership organizations continually inform students about and provide those answers, and oftentimes in a more effective way. And so it was a little frustrating for me, and then there was even a direct moment of that where a student asked about getting more engagement or how they interact or how they can have some kind of response back from administrators is a part of that, and just almost zero awareness in the sense of that our organizations exist for those exact purposes as being a medium and a means through which we can communicate and collaborate even with administrative officers as well as faculty as well as other organizations on campus. That is literally part of our function. And in addition to that, the note that I made to myself is that in many ways that is part of the problem, even with our interactions with administrators, is that even in their own responses to those questions, when a student asks, well, how can I actually communicate or how can I get a response back from an administrative office to a question the persons in my program have or whatever that is that they don't even make the connection with our student constituency bodies. That we're not brought up as a part of their response. Send us an email, but never a mention of, well, have you talked to your student constituency representatives, your student constituency leadership, have you talked to your union? And that really sort of was unexpected, and it supports one of the things that I thought I could propose for the council to consider, something that I think I'm interested in pursuing, is something along the lines of what I have on there as I oversee the Interconstituency Shared Governance Conference. Not entirely sure where exactly it would go, but one of the things that is recurring, the continuing issue I feel like has been going on campus, definitely a massive element to this search and how it's conducted and its potential outcome is various constituency bodies feeling like they are not taken seriously as a part of the shared governance processes on campus, and certainly the feeling and indeed I think accurately perceiving that they don't have a lot of efficacy in that process. But as I've tried to engage with a number of different persons across campus that are in those sort of leadership roles within constituencies, one of the things that has occurred to me is that oftentimes I don't know that we exactly know where everyone is and what they expect out of that shared governance, what their expectations are for shared governance at the university. And even as a university as a whole, with as many things that we've tried to respond to in the last 10 years, and particularly in the last 5, I feel like there is a great opportunity for us to renew that declaration of what our expectations are for shared governance, our vision for the university through that image of shared governance. And so I think that that's something we can pursue. In my mind, right now, the idea of that is reaching out, at the very least, to those other constituency bodies as formally recognized, but I think it's something that could expand beyond that. To engage in a discussion that, as far as I'm aware, hasn't happened at least formally in the sense of what those bodies expect out of shared governance to deliver that to the relevant bodies. Short of that, we leave that item for the council to consider, or I suppose on next actions. You have the letter from the chancellor, his response. You have some adjoining letters and that recap and proposal of a potential action that I'm interested in taking.
Sorry, so are you taking any notes or discussions about the letter? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, if there's anything someone wants to propose, make a motion, ask a question, anything like that, we have this on old business. Yeah.
Yeah, I honestly felt when I read that, like the first time so we got the letter, I felt it's like, okay, I understand that, but thank you, it's going to happen. That's at least how I I mean, I understand it, I might be right or wrong, but that's actually how I felt. And I don't know how you all, I mean, felt when you read the letter. It was even like, oh, let me remind you or tell you about that, like article or whatever, some other policy where that sentence that was one of the factors. So I felt it's okay. So I got that. We hear that. Thank you, but it's happening. So how did or how you all felt, or if you would like to share? I might be wrong. I mean.
I felt the same way. I mean, I felt like it was, there were a lot of other things that were addressed as far as concerns, and I think those were overlooked. And when I, was like, well, it's the semantics of just saying, well, we're in the lines of the policies are moving forward, regardless of concerns, regardless of perception, and moving forward. And I think one of those that we very, very clearly stated was, the consideration beyond the articulation of that policy is the legitimacy of it based on the number of candidates, which already kind of had predicted would be a limited number. And it turned out there literally was only one. So I think with that being one of our primary concerns that was articulated, and knowing that probably by the time this were to go out, I think really overlooks a very large primary concern. And I think that would play, and what many other people in the room have articulated, is that there's really so much not suspicion that there's been surveys that Clay has done, as far as the climate and how students view administrators, and there's kind of distrust. And it's actionable items like this that further that distrust, that widen that gap of our voice being part of a student-centered approach. Because that can be something that they claim to do, but the mechanics and some of the things that even was articulated by Carbondale today really is more of a corporate model, and we're seen as commodities and items to build up the budget. So I think it just furthers that distrust.
Yeah, and that is in many ways the conundrum that our executive board and many others on campus, and certainly as I contemplate what to do, we've been trying to figure out, it's just like, we can try and get into semantics of what a policy does and doesn't say, but like I said, ultimately we're not necessarily going to be positioned well to make that. Nonetheless, in the sense of timeliness of the matter, it is sort of, mean, ultimately, you're just going to a lawsuit or something like that. And like I said, we're not really positioned for that, and it's not even necessarily timely, it's just litigation at that point. And insofar that it does become an issue of whether or not the judgment being exercised by an individual that is one of the individuals with the organizational authority to make that decision versus one of the, or a number of the, in reality, constituency bodies that have a role within the governance of the university to advise as to the best execution of judgment, have said we don't agree with that judgment, and then having that clear to say, saying, well, I understand that position, but nonetheless, I feel my judgment is the one that I'm going to go with. Not a lot left to do at that point. And so, trying to think about where we go from there. And one of the things that is on my mind is the Board of Trustees meeting that is in December, December 4th and 3rd, I think it is. And I will certainly sign up to make a public comment. I'm not exactly sure where that will be delivered. That's one of the items that can be under old business. This is our last council meeting for this semester. So we won't have a council meeting, at least a non-special meeting, to consider what I might communicate on behalf of our council and our constituencies. But it's something that I'll be working on. And so the one thing that I have thought that I could use some of that time, there'll be two opportunities, and so far there are two meetings, to address is making that call for the sense of some kind of conference of our constituencies, potentially construed rather largely across campus, to actually engage collectively in the sense of what is it that we want out of shared governance at this university. I think that might be an important thing that hasn't happened, at least since I've been here, and as much change has happened on this campus. I think that might be a positive thing. It doesn't necessarily address the immediacy of the matter that has prompted it. I don't think that it does in any way, shape, or form. But whereas most persons at the end of the day are like, when do we get a win here in the long-term sense and in the historical sense? So far, to my mind, that's the only thing that I've seen that I see a solution that can present a long-term systemic change to a dynamic that many persons that have been here for a number of years, particularly faculty, that feel like they are rather helpless might be too strong of a word, but defeated, perhaps. Well, the formally recognized ones are the Faculty Senate, the Graduate Council, the Civil Service Affairs Council, the Administrative and Professional Staff Council, the Undergraduate Student Government, and well, the unions aren't. They're like a weird carve out, which I wouldn't exclude the unions, but they are a weird carve out. As far as the administrative governance, it is those, and then the undergraduate student government and the graduate professional student government. Then the union has a different relationship, and that's why we're not in the same meetings. Like, the unions don't get invited to constituency heads, but that's because they're not administrative partners in the governance of the university the same way that we are, because they're not administrative. They represent the workers who are managed by the administrators, but nonetheless are important constituents within the overall governance and administration of the university. And so in my mind, any kind of like just conference on shared governance at the university would include the Graduate Assistants United, the Faculty Association, and it is a civil service union. I'm not exactly sure of the name of that one, but it has a letter. We should have it on it. ACE. Yeah, definitely include those. And is it the same faculty association also represents the non-tenure track?
Those are separate.
Yeah, so there's a separate one. So that would even be another one. So, and then even apart from that, it potentially would be other constituencies that aren't necessarily part of that. So it's like a whole other governing docs type of thing that would come up as far as how that would go. I have not reached out to any of the other chief sort of key straightforward constituency heads to say, hey, is this something that we can do? Something similar to it has been proffered by some folks in the faculty senate. I haven't gotten any follow-up on that, but there was some outreach about trying to have better collaboration and communication across interconstituencies from the faculty senate committee. So it's something that's out there, something that I've talked about on and off as well. And so this would formalize it, create a process. So I have various ideas about how it might be, but it's something that ultimately you got to try and do collectively. So but that's a short list of the constituencies to answer your question. The big ones at least. There are any number of additional.
And then the constituencies that they came together, what can be done? Like what kind of governance do we actually have over the university? And as a follow-up question to that too, is any of the governance changing their structure? Because I don't know how they're all set up. I don't know how members are being promoted.
I think at the end of the day, in many ways, which is kind of potentially even a really cool opportunity, this is literally something I came up with after having a meeting with Trustee Lockett, where we were trying to figure out what exactly we can do after having a few other meetings, and then we came together after I was gone last week. And so it's just like, all right, this is what I've gotten, what have you gotten, let's catch up, where are we? And then left that meeting feeling rather defeated and quite bad, and trying to think what exactly can we do short of just get pissed off and yell, but that doesn't necessarily actually change the outcome. It certainly doesn't necessarily change anything long term. And then I came up with this idea, pitched it, kind of like it, want to see where it goes. Realistically, there's not anything that would give that kind of a body authority in the sense of a command authority. And I think that what's interesting is that when you look at the national picture of universities, I think it's happening all across the country. Essentially, higher education as an industry, it's a sector of our society. It just enjoyed an entire generation or two of growth, where no one ever had to really be concerned about much of anything except for just like total dereliction and malfeasance in the sense of the institution struggling. But now you have fewer persons matriculating into the possibility of going to college, an incredibly competitive landscape, and austerity for subsidized state funding for universities. And so a lot of those principles that universities had enshrined in their shared governance and sort of the day-to-day practices, amongst a number of different factors, now that belts are getting tightened, budgets are getting smaller, and pool of persons potentially to subsidize your university in the form of tuition fees is getting smaller, you see a lot of those ideals of practice and praxis going by the wayside. And I feel like we are a pretty good exemplar of that. And I don't necessarily see the trend in that changing. Diana brought up the idea that's like, we heard a pretty corporate presentation of how you run the organization to meet a set of goals. And so in that way, there's not really a lot of terrain to define what it would be, other than the idea of why don't we actually take a minute to really think about this and develop it as a conference of multiple constituencies that has historically been very influential and very visionary in setting the direction of a university, but doing that at a moment where that seems to be something that everyone that is in a similar boat to our university, whether better or worse, seems to also be losing ground on, and say, well, this is what we believe in, and this is what our expectations are, and if this is what we want, then we need to figure out a way to get to it. And in that way, SIU would be a leader in taking on that kind of an initiative, which wouldn't actually be atypical of this institution or its other institutions within its system. That's something that all of the parts of SIU have done historically. It would be interesting for our constituents to do that, but as far as like a command authority that exists within the policies that are charter out the university or the specific campus in university, no. And that's what we're hitting up against, right? And that's one of the things that we're struggling with. It's just like, As a constituency, we've made it perfectly clear, as well as a number of others, that we disagree with that judgment and do not see it in the best interest of the university. We see it as violating the intent, if not, I guess, the letter of the policies that govern such a process. It doesn't matter at the end of the day. So we don't have that kind of command as far as a constituency body in how we advise and participate in the shared governance process of the university. And so where do you go from there? And I've been here for enough years to have seen the yelling and the fighting and the bickering and the foying and all of the things, and it doesn't really seem to change much. And so what can we do as an alternative? And I mean, in some ways this is just trying to engage in some collective organizing of all of the various state constituency bodies of the university so that we can put that task into all of us in a organized and collective way.
So
Yes.
for that conference or gathering, will the administration be a part of that conversation?
No.
So,
Insofar that the AP Staff Council would be part of it, and there's a little bit of crossover with that, yes, but no.
how are they going to understand what we are trying to make clear if they are not a part of the conversation?
And I should be more clear. In my conception of that, they would not, at least in the sense of a voting member of it. But you know, insofar that it would be a deliberated and agreed upon structure and process that may change. But I don't necessarily see that. Administrators, in one sense of it, are there to caretake for an institution that is pursuing the goals and vision of the persons that it serves. At least historically, that's how universities, at least at times, have been conceived. And administrators are there to meet the needs and fulfill the functions required to achieve the goals defined by the faculty and the students and the persons that work there, not to define a vision through which those employees execute and deliver on the vision established by an independent administrative visionary. And that is most times what persons are referring to when they talk about like the corporatization of higher education. It's talking about something that's more just the idea that you have persons that are leadership within an organization, or at least, you know, it's the hierarchy of the organization, positions at the top, developing plans through which then everyone that falls under that in the org chart is to implement according to the plan. That's not historically how all universities function. And so a lot of the disconnect, a lot of the pushback, and a lot of what we see on this campus in particular is the idea that it's just like people don't jive with that.
But I mean, I can see if we are having that conversation with different constituencies on campus without the administration, I think we are feeding that distrust more and making the crack even bigger. Because what I'm trying to understand is if we are having them on board to understand and to get what we want them to hear, I think that's why we need to have them on board on this same ship so we can sail together. Otherwise, if it's just sailing by ourselves, at the end, that distrust is getting bigger and they are doing what they think is right, and we are out of the game. And I think we decided, if that's at least my opinion, we decided to go out of the game if we are not having them in the conversation. So
Yeah.
what do you think? What is your perception of that?
I think that that's a valid point. I think it's something that we can consider as we continue forward. I saw a couple of hands, but unless I've got a motion otherwise, I've already entertained this item, I think at some length. And it more than anything, what we're getting on is it's not figured out, which I didn't intend for it to be something that was presented as something that has already been figured out, that is sort of finalized. But it does seem as though there's some interest in this as something to go forward with and consider.
We both have shorter reports, so we would be open to continuing the conversation if the motion to continue the conversation, as you
Sure.
suggested.
Does anyone want to put it is 8:45 or 8:46, does anyone want a particular time limit on this? When entertaining such motion? Or leave it at my discretion continuing?
Yeah.
Okay, couple of hands. Whomever would like to go first or whoever.
Well, I would make that motion to initiate a process to create an interconstituency shared governance conference and a system to communicate better in between constituencies.
All right, so motion on the floor to create an interconstituency shared governance conference creation process for the consideration of matters therein related. I believe I heard a second. That's correct. Motion has been seconded. Is there any discussion on that?
I would like to add to that motion to include the administration into that conference so they can hear what we are thinking. Adding that to the motion.
All right. Motion to amend to include the administration as a component of the efforts to create an interconstituency shared governance conference creation process.
As far as
Motion on the floor, order would be, well, that motion has a second.
Did you actually open for discussion?
Yes, we're open for discussion. Member has called for a motion to amend. As I understand it, that motion is not received as a friendly amendment offered, and we have motion on that for such an amendment to include the administration as a partner within the efforts to create an interconstituency shared governance conference creation process. Do not see a motion for a second of that, or sorry, do not see a second for that motion. Consider that motion failed. We are still under discussion of the original motion, which has been seconded.
I believe that all of the members of the constituency are in groups with the administration, and the administration has to them in those groups with the administration there. So in my opinion, what this is to gather, come back to the core roots because there's that distrust that's been built, and we're not being listened to. So this is to come together to lick our wounds and discuss how we are going to go to the administration. Whereas I think it's administration in this specific thing. I think that would hurt rather than help for this specific.
But also, like, what is the ultimate outcome or goal of that conference? That's my big question. Where are we heading? What is the end? Just to say.
Just really quick.
So real quick, to respond, I would say that the goals of it exactly are to be determined. That's the biggest thing. It's not something that we'll have total efficacy over, total determination over. But more than anything, I think with this motion, what we're saying is we would wish as a council to formally endorse the efforts to create something like this. Bethany, to that?
Yes, just furthermore, we have to switch the narrative back to, like Ashley was saying, that it's not going from what administration wants and that dictates how everyone else operates. It needs to go from a bottom-up perspective because that's what the universities are for, to make sure the students of how we are thriving and the structure of our entire university is not play. And so we need to overhaul that in terms of, so that's why administration should not be in that position that we have to. I wouldn't necessarily with our rule, but that conversation has to be started of, okay, what is it exactly that the students want? What is it that AP wants? What is it that the service needs? And when that is determined, then that group of people as constituents of all of the concerned parties can then take that and say, this is how our university needs to go. So that's the only way that we're going to do that.
Hannah?
I was just gonna say also what you said, that the goals need to be determined, I think, as the constituencies meet, but also I will say that Clay and I have discussed, with other like union presidents and such in the past of ways of creating common narratives to try to get through. And I think that that might be one of the things that would be the goal here in some ways is to, as you're saying, like have more efficacy through creating common narratives. Shaping the discourse is the word.
Yeah, so you went to a good point, a valid point, and I really appreciated that. So our perspective should be coming bottom up. But if we are having that conference for ourselves, so we are telling ourselves what we want, we know. We need them to understand what we want, not us. I mean, and that when I say us, I don't mean me and you and just our council, but also the constituencies that in that conference. They need what they want. I mean, they know what they want. We need what we want, but we want to make that clear to them. Yeah.
I feel like this is like a two-part. So I think what they're saying is that this will be the part one. I think what you're saying is like as far as audience and goal, right? That they have to have a message to then deliver to that audience. But that one that is united, as Anna has said, of a shared narrative or shaping narrative. And so I think that, you know, like having that group of like together. But I think I really appreciate what you're saying because I think the only way for it to truly be productive is to get past that ground level and start moving up, right? As far as allowing that narrative to shape and move up that ladder as was described, right? So if it's from that. So yes, I think that what you're saying is valid, and I think it's the step two of what was placed originally on the floor. So my future impacted right now, that and I think it's something to bring to a vote once that's figured out and once that they have an opportunity as far as goals and further plans and action.
Because I really feel we are setting a project, and I mean that's at least how I see it. We don't have an objective or goal to go for just to build a narrative. I think that's important goal, but it should include more than just building a narrative, because each constituency knows what they want. But
each individual one does. But I mean, we are talking about a very large and diverse group of people, so to actually collectively know what are the faculty members want versus students, those actually are very different concepts and ideas. So I think like that is a very, very large meeting, very large dialogue, and very difficult, you know. And so I think you are able to narrow that and strategically create a plan that is delivered and addressed to those who have the power to shape and shift things from the administrative level. I think that I would say that they want that. I don't think that that's something that they don't want. I just think it's the one step at a time.
Just step in here. Yeah, and I wouldn't begin to assume that every constituency necessarily knows what they want going forward. I think that's one of the things that is sort of what we need to consider. I think every constituency, by and large, has a pretty big majority that feels like they have needs that are going unmet, either in part or wholesale, but they don't necessarily know where they want to go from there. And we certainly don't necessarily know where we want to go as a group of constituencies, as an interconstituency sort of body engaged in shared governance and planning for the university. And so any initial effort that would be towards the creation of something like this ultimately would be about establishing the actual structure of the organization and the principles on which something like that would be created. So hypothetically, we can think about it in the sense of even if we approach a constituency about this, I mean, nothing's preventing them from saying like, yeah, I'm not even going to entertain that, I'm not interested, right? We don't even know that yet. And then ultimately the other thing is in the sense of how do you engage in a practice where you're engaging with multiple constituencies to do something like establishing what our goals are, what our needs are, what is it that we would like to improve, and how you represent all those views. And so I think in the sense of entertaining a formal process to engage in the creation of that, that's what's at its goal. And how do you actually create a process in an organization whereby these multiple constituencies come together to engage in a planning process of articulating what it is that their goals or their desires or their vision is for the university. And so that, in the sense of proposing and putting it on the agenda, that is most of what's on my mind is what does that thing look like, and how do we structure it, and how do we convene it? So how many representatives does these constituency have? Because I don't necessarily want to be the person who's doing that. I don't need to be the person who's doing that. I mean, maybe I'm there and I'm in the room, but maybe I'm there with 2 other persons that also represent graduate professional students as a part of that, and I'm there with 3 other faculty members from the faculty senate's appointment, right? It's just that we have to actually figure that out in the sense of what's fair to everyone. And so more than anything, a motion to formally endorse our council under the directorship of our executive to engage in a process for that effort and creating it. That would say that those would be the goals for the particular motion.
Can we vote on the motion?
We can. Is there any further discussion, or if someone wants to procedurally even go to the effort of calling the question?
Just the last word.
So, yes.
Thank you so much for all of those clarifications. And I see the idea, but again, I hope we don't end it up just saying as like a conference, as a big group, telling the administrators, oh, what you do is just bad. So we need to have also fair perspective on what they did well, and we support them. So they, again, to gain the trust again, and saying that what you did, we agree that was good. But those are the areas that need more work. So, because I assume, I can imagine if I'm one of the administrators, and all of that constituencies are getting together just to tell me, oh, what you are doing is bad. I mean, that again creates more distrust. That's my opinion.
And to your point, that will be a continuing dialogue going forward. I don't think that that's something that, even with deciding and agreeing upon something to create such a conference across constituencies, that we would even know from that point. That would be something that would evolve along with that body once created. So that I think that is an important dialogue that will continue on. We have more discussion? Call questions. Is that motion seconded? Motion seconded. All right. Don't think we have to vote on that, but man, I can't remember. But we have a motion to call the question. It's been seconded. I don't see any protest. All right. So then I'll just skip whether or not we need the 2/3 vote, which I think we do, but I can't remember exactly. But we'll go to a vote. So all those in favor of passing the motion to create an inter-constituency shared governance conference creation process under the charge of the executive or on behalf of this council, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Seeing none opposed, motion passes.
How about this?
Thank you all. Okay.
Abstention, please. Yeah.
How is everyone? There's one benefit to standing up for some of these agenda items, and it's that once I start getting tired of standing, I know that the agenda item is gone. That's good deliberative work. Thank you all.
I have a question.
Yes.
Do we have a timeline for this particular search for the provost and vice chancellor position? Are we, so what I'm asking is this going to be discussed in future meetings? Considering this is our last meeting of the semester yet.
I have a feeling they're gonna bring that to the floor of the December board trustees. Just get her in.
Yeah, I think that's why.
That's why they're doing it so fast.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
exactly what they're doing.
I would not take a bet that goes against that on Friday is included in the board of trustees agenda matter, which is the date that they have to make it public for a public meeting.
Okay. Are we, can I make a comment?
Absolutely, sure.
So we drafted a memo where we sought clarification. We got a response that was not clarifying. And I, for one, really appreciate the faculty senate's resolution to whatever however they framed it, to postpone. Would we be able to draft and pass a similar resolution to the faculty sentence?
Procedurally, if the motion was posed before the council, yeah, absolutely, and so far that it is, yeah.
So can I motion to do that?
Do you have, such a motion?
I don't know what you're saying.
Well, the formality, however formal, to communicate to anybody. One such recommendation that I could make, similar to what we did last week for the tuition on graduate students at the university, and in parallel with that of the graduate council's own resolution. We do have written before us the resolution from the faculty senate itself. I don't know that there is language in there specific to the faculty senate, but we can make whatever amendments or changes to that resolution itself, and one could motion for us to consider and adopt that resolution itself.
So I would motion for us to consider and adopt this resolution with minor changes, as well as a change to reflect the updated information that we have only one applicant.
So motion?
Second.
Motion seconded. All right, put it under discussion. Can we make those amendments to the resolution clear? I mean, therefore be it resolved that the SIUC faculty, I imagine that should be one that changes.
GPSC. I would also, whereas conducting an internal search for the next provost has excluded many qualified candidates. That happened.
Is that an addition or is that a change?
A change.
Which one is that?
Second from the bottom, whereas.
Second whereas.
Whereas conducting an internal search for the next provost has excluded many qualified candidates.
Okay. I'd like to post a friendly amendment that we change the resolution title. And also catalog this one as R1920.011. A resolution of the SIUC Graduate Professional Student Council, perhaps. Any further discussion, any further amendments?
Therefore, be resolved that GPSC is in full support. Changing from SIUC to PR.
All right, yeah, so even lose the SIUC, but yeah, therefore be it resolved that the Graduate Professional Student Council are in full support of postponing the search. Correct as written?
Yeah, just a question. Would that change anything in the equation with what is going on? Yeah, you are the.
So I have a meeting,
Yeah.
and so if y'all pass something, then I can take the meeting, and it's one of the more final meetings that we will be having. So this would be great to have, and this is how our body can articulate that to the entirety of it.
What is that meeting?
Tomorrow.
So we would have to pass and articulate the tonight.
Would that change anything? At least in the meeting? Do you,
I will fully voice all of these concerns to the committee, and we'll have to discuss it.
So,
But in terms of the final outcome, the search committee itself is still advisory, and so final decision is not the final decision. We just make a recommendation.
and there is something to be said. understand the point of the matter in your question, but at the same time, and this is something that is a bigger issue that is on my mind a lot too, is that the body should do what it sees as its will, despite the fact that it may not lead to what it is that we want to do. My biggest thing and how I try to be the executor and administrator for our body and our constituency is the way that we do that matters as much, if not more. So if we call to postpone the search, which I feel like in a rhetorical sense as well as a procedural sense, would make a lot of sense provided the letter expressing our concerns and the response that we received in the other constituencies on campus. I think it is a very logical response. It's something that I would communicate to the office of the chancellor, or probably also forward to the president's office, just to make sure that the president's office is aware of that. I think it all makes sense, but that it may or may not change anything in the sense of the outcome of the search. Our primary consideration should be whether or not it accurately reflects the interests, the will, the desires of the persons we represent. And that should be the measure of whether or not we do or don't do something. And then my role is to find the best way to do it so that our long-term goals and interests are well cared for.
So thank you for that. What I'm looking at is more from a leadership perspective. If the efforts are being put in 20% of consideration, that can make 80% of impact, that will help this body to work more effectively, rather than trying to get all of the consideration into the 80% that get only 20% of outcomes. So to me, we are trying to reinvent the wheel, because we did the first memo and the letter, and we got that response, and now we are doing another one, and the wheel is going. That's at least my opinion. You were about to say something.
This would also show solidarity with the other constituencies that we were talking about previously, the conference, and it's going to the committee that's actually putting out their recommendations, or it will affect their decision, saying, oh, look, all of these constituencies are in solidarity here, maybe we should not recommend this person, or it would change the recommendation. That will be moving forward. So I think it would actually have a change in that aspect.
That's what I'm hoping. Thank you. We are done discussing. Thank you. You can take it on from there.
Any further discussion on the motion? Do I have any further amendments, friendly or otherwise? A motion to waive the reading of the resolution as amended.
Motion to waive.
So motion is seconded. Second, waive the reading. All those in favor of waiving the reading of the resolution as amended, indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Seeing none opposed, motion carries. All right, make motion on the resolution for resolution to postpone the SIUC provost search. I will get a hand count on this. If you approve of passing this motion, this resolution, please indicate by raising your hand.
I can see like 2, 3 hands on there. That's good.
Hold on, if we can do one more count, I'm not sure if I got that count right, so please keep your hand raised if you approve of the motion. Right. All right, all those opposed to passing the motion, resolution?
We are building support here.
All right, I have recorded 17 plus 2 in favor of passing the resolution as amended, and 2 opposed. That vote, we do have quorum, motion passes. and I will communicate this. And Bethany, for the purposes of the committee, is there anything that you require me to communicate this?
As a chair for the president's office,
Can you share that with me in an email? Yeah. All right. Good deal. 12.
I think there is a question there.
Oh, yeah, you're going back.
Yes.
I believe you mentioned at some point long ago that you were also going to put in a comment at the board of trustees next meeting. And is there anything that you would need from us for that? Because I think you said this is the last meeting we're going to be having for that.
As far as any advisement, any recommendation as to what to include or not to include is a part of an emphasis of that statement itself. Yeah, I welcome that. Insofar that the council could particularly advance a particular motion as to what that is to be said. I don't know that we don't typically do that in the past, at least. I guess historically, typically it's somewhat dismissive. But as far as anything I need, I mean, anything that someone wants to bring up, whether it's coming by the office and talking, whether it's sending an email, but with the addition of the passing of this resolution, our previous letter, the discussions that we've had in the last few meetings itself, and discussions I'm sure I'll have leading into the meeting itself, I'll be building a response off of that. I'm probably also going to be digging a little historically in some of the comments that I've made the previous board meetings, and I'm leaning towards probably making a comment in both the executive and the general session, just because I feel like I have two things to speak to. One, the search in general, or the search specific, and then the sort of efforts on our interconstituency conference. So probably be signing up for both. But nothing specific, but open to all, kind of. All right, we have one other item of new business on the agenda. Bill from the allocation board.
Okay, we did have we did meet with an organization this evening. We met with the Iranian Student Association. They are asking for funding towards their event. I might say this wrong, I apologize, Yalda Night, which is going to be December 14th from 6 p.m. to 11 in this room, Old Main. And this primarily they were expecting about 50 people to attend. Their organization consists, I'm using this word again, primarily, I don't know why I'm just tired, but graduate students, but also in attendance be also those from the greater community, including faculty members and their families, to celebrate what they describe as a celebration of the longest night of the year, which is actually on December 21st, but that it's a celebration of one of the most important cultural events that they have in Iran. It celebrates the night because starting the day, symbolically, it's the victory of the light over the darkness. And so it's a gathering amongst this community. And so they have requested that GPSC support the event. They had originally requested, I'll just read the resolution at this point, unless anybody has any questions about the event. We're just ready to go. Get done. All right, so resolution R 1920.010, a resolution for consideration by the Graduate Professional Student Council on Tuesday, November 19th, 2019. Whereas the Graduate Professional Student Council may designate a portion of its fund for allocation to register student organizations for the purpose of supporting student activities, and whereas the allocation board is authorized by the Graduate Professional Student Council to supervise the allocation of funds available to the Graduate Professional Students Registry organizations, and whereas on November 13, 2019, the application board received an application from the Iranian Student Association, hereafter RSO, requesting $330 to support the Yellow Night, and whereas having heard a hearing of RSO on November 19, 2019,
in which the qualifications, eligibility of the RSO, stated uses for the funds requested and anticipated benefits provided by the program being considered. The application supports this, the Graduate Professional Student Council's recommendation of $250 be allocated to the RSO in support of this application, therefore be it resolved. The Graduate Professional Student Council, having heard this evaluation recommendation, the statement of facts hereby authorizes the for use during the academic year and according to the agreements made by the allocation board on transfer funds to be made to the RSO in the amount of $250, and authorizes the president of the Graduate Professional Student Council to take all action required in the execution of the resolution in accordance with GPSC established policy.
Thank you. All right, any discussion on the resolution fund?
How much did we fund them last year?
$50.
And this year?
We are suggesting 250. The reason why is that they came to us after the event last year. So it was more of a courtesy that, like you, they had already held a successful event, if that makes sense. And so they were much more organized in presenting us this information this year and getting us it in a timely manner. They actually, had their executive officers come and kind of explain the event in detail. And so it was a very different level of presentation and a different level of professionalism than the previous year of Coach Bill provided.
Further discussion?
I should say the overall cost of the event, which is not listed on the resolution, is more expected to be $780. So this is just a portion of that. They have already, they will be charging $5 a person. So they are expecting about 50 people, so $250 at the door. And then also they've already attained $200. So this would be the amount to kind of help them reach that, the overall goal of the expectation of overall cost.
Seeing no further discussion, we can move to a vote. All those in agreement, resolution R 1920.010, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Seeing none opposed, motion passes. Thank you. All right. And the next item of business, we have officer reports. First report being from Vice President for Graduate School Affairs.
Okay, I will make it snappy since I said I only had maybe 2 minutes worth of an announcement. So we did have a meeting recently, so again, any graduate council reps, if I missed anything, let me know. Quick things, they said that we have 1,414 admitted undergraduate students for fall of 2020. They did not have the numbers for the graduate students, but I made that request of Dr. Sheets, so hopefully at the next meeting we'll have those numbers to see where we're at compared to the past. It was also discussed that they have a system that they were piloting with undergraduates where you could opt into a text message system that sent you text reminders for things like fill out your FAFSA, register for classes. They had not piloted it with grad students, but I asked if that was an option. They said they would look into it. It seemed like it was, so that will be pending soon. They're also currently exploring the possibility of changing admission criteria. That was not clear whether it was just undergraduate or graduate and undergraduate. I'm assuming for the most part it probably means like testing scores for undergraduates. A lot of institutions are looking at those right now, so that's probably what I'm guessing it is. But that was not made clear. Dr. Sheet did present his strategic plan that he had presented to us with some of the additional suggestions that we had made. He also asked us to look at it another time and offer for some feedback if you could give that to me. And then I will offer it to him so he can kind of keep tweaking the strategic plan that he has as well. We also received a report from the HLC Higher Learning Commission committee member, and they mentioned, which actually I should have sent to Clay, but I'll try to send it to him this week to send out. There is a website, hlcaccreditation.siu.edu, where anybody of any reason can make any comments to the website about any of the criterion, whether you think that they are accurate, inaccurate, if you have feedback to offer. And all of those comments will be taken until December 9th, at which point they'll close it for good, because that's when they have to make all final revisions to create the report that they actually submit to HLC. We did vote on all of the resolutions that we discussed, that Nicholas discussed last meeting, except for the one that was contested. The person was unable to come to the meeting, but I just sent an email to the grad council rep, so check your email. We were told that the representative cannot come to the next general council meeting either, so they're coming to the executive council meeting this Thursday. So I will hopefully have more information about that strange Doctor of Medical Sciences NUI on Thursday, and be able to share that with you before the next general council meeting. More fun to come from that. But that covers about all of that. And then also, grad council reps, if I could keep you like 2 minutes after the meeting, that'd be awesome. It'll be really fast. And then the last two things are technically both committee reports, but I figure I'll just take a couple minutes real fast here. I'm on the diversity council. I've mentioned it before. I'll have a much more full report in January because we're planning a large scale event that's coming up in April. But I know that in January I'll have more details, so I will fill out a formal report and send that to Clay to get to you ahead of time of the meeting. And then also I have no new updates for the chancellor search. Just FYI for that.
Any questions, discussion on that report? Alright, seeing no discussion, moving on, report from Vice President for Administrative Affairs, Diane.
Sure, I was just going to remind you of what we have left in our event funding. With the $250 approved, we have $6,925 remaining in our event funding, and we've spent so far $7,075. And then as far as our career development reimbursement award, we do have several pending, but as of now, we have $10,750 remaining. This is based on, and we have spent $607,500. We're good, very good. And then I did want to also note, there are some changes if you're an international student or international students within your program. As far as the process of submitting for CD for these, is that if they're applying for this or a type of award or scholarship from the university for the first time, there are additional documents that they will have to submit before these documents would have been submitted or requested by the International Tax Office. They've had to switch in personnel. So now the person wants all that documentation sent to our accountant, who is Tracy Blake at the Office of Student Engagement. So now if they're applying for the first time, not only will they have to turn in our application and all other required documents, but they now have to turn in the Alien Information Collection Form, the W-8 benefit form, potentially a copy of their visa, their passport, their I-94, as well as their work authorization. Get it hard. Get it hard. But I will try to have those forms available on our website and have that information, or just note that. For some of our international students, they may have already included this to the International Tax Office when applying to the university, or may have been processed and put on file already with the Center of International Education. So, so it really just depends on what's being kicked back to us, and what they're saying is we don't have to do it. So I've had to deal with a lot of drag and communication on behalf of international students. Oh, and then apologize, I had switched up the documentation for that and put it on our website. I thought, sorry, I saw that you, I think the link was down during the week when I had put it up. On my end, it looked like it was active because I put it up on my computer through my Dropbox, so it just had the appearance of being active. So apologize if you went on there recently, but thank you, Clay, for updating that. And so make sure that you're using that new form. Oh, and then also one other thing I noticed too, if you are an RSO that's you're requesting event funding, you have to make sure that you're an active RSO1 and that your account is in good balance. If not, we will get an email from Tracy that will let us know that there are some issues with the account, and we may have to withhold your meeting date until there's a place we can put the money. That's it.
Any questions, discussion, report?
I'm sorry, how much is spent already in travel?
In travel, what was spent was $6,750, but I may, but there's a few remaining. So if once I get those in, it'll be about 7,000 something spent.
But I'm not sure if this total includes, I don't think it includes the additional, or how we're,
This is just based off the original budget, allocated budget.
That's the discussion we got to have as far as.
Yeah, because that would be an internal discussion of like budget review and things like that.
I think we should have enough funds on hand that we don't turn back any applications for those funds. But how we move around cash on hand with the addition of the $5,000 scholarship, which that goes directly to CBRA. That's more money than we were expecting to get. So we might reroute some money internally to another area, whether it's FAB or whether it's research boards or wherever, to just sort of share that additional resources. Because we're also still planning on doing some development with the foundation in the spring with that original target of 3,000. We pretty much said if we bank for 5, and maybe we still go for 3 more this spring. See what we can do there. So, yeah, overall, we shouldn't have to turn down these CBRA application this year, at least as long as it stays relative to historical numbers. If we see something like a 250% application outreach compared to years prior, then we'll have to still turn back. But so long as we stay within like a plus or minus 15-20% range, yeah, we're good. Stuff to allocate, which is cool. All right. Let's see, my report, 28. I did send this out. I will try and move through as quickly as possible. So, Board of Trustees, we've already talked about it. There is a link to that article that is happening. I will make a statement. Anybody that wants to have a conversation about what I'm going to say, give a recommendation, whether to say or not say, whatever that is, more than welcome to reach out, come by office hours, however best. And thank you for the resolution. That's more things that I can take to what we present. I pretty much at this point, most definitely, will be probably signing up to make a statement on both days, executive council and then public comments at the meeting. Under SIU affairs, so search for a vice chancellor of academic affairs and provost. We discussed that. The biggest thing with that item on my report is other link to the news. So if anything, you've got questions or just want to be more informed, you have all of those news sources that are linked. And they will provide a pretty in-depth overview of the process and the person's perspectives, in addition to the letters that you've been shared as part of our meeting. You have the recaps from the State of the Union University address that happened, was that last week? Or was that 2 weeks ago?
Like it was last week.
Yeah, it's too late. I think it was 2 weeks ago. It was last week.
You were gone, yeah.
I was in San Francisco. The State of the University address, and then also a campus conversation that was right thereafter. You've got some news articles, as well as a follow-up one from the Daily Egyptian about the students meeting with USG, which really came out of that campus conversation series. Some good coverage of things there, keeping presses and developments. But I'll leave it in those news articles and any questions folks have. The Higher Learning Commission student survey that Lindy brought up, you have the links to both Carbondale's assurance argument that's open for review at the current time, as well as the HLC's third-party comment for our reaccreditation process, where that comment goes direct to the Higher Learning Commission. Now, the student survey that the university administers on behalf of the Higher Learning Commission did close. It went out via email and SIU Online, which we discussed in a previous meeting, but that did close on the 13th of November. There was a faculty senate meeting last week. I was not able to go. I did get a debriefing on it. One of the things that I thought was interesting was I got the report that there was some discussion of the admittance criteria for undergraduates. And sort of stemming out of some other meetings that have been going on. There was also last week that meeting about the legalization of cannabis in the state of Illinois and how that affects students on this campus and just policies on this campus in general. I linked to the Daily Egyptian article on that. Just encourage everyone to take a look at that. It's something that in the next semester we can also do some information session on in council. Our executive board, fast forwarding to line 4 on the GPSC affairs.
So trying to have a meeting here December 3rd, be under discussion, a number of things coming up for the next semester. Like I just mentioned, development work for the SIU Foundation for some further donations, external funding, some implementation as far as our academics and research board that we've had under discussion. Some outreach and membership action, should be getting that going very early on in the spring semester, reaching out to those programs you have representation from, and engaging the executive board and how we should go about strategic planning, the process, the plan, some goals, how we set goals as an organization, and then kickstarting the work for planning for our spring awards programming. That'll be things that we'll start looking at for the executive board, and then going to the last bit off of the president. So the GPSC office, still I believe we have in the works to hire a worker in the office, as well as trying to reorganize our office, just the actual space, and then a number of activity, or a flurry of activity I'm hoping to work on over Thanksgiving break as far as the website. So the website might look rather different here in the next month or so. Hopefully it will get reactive, or what is responsive, so that it actually loads properly on a mobile device, as well as some just other housekeeping type things for you all. That as well leaves the round report. If there's any question or discussion on those. Seeing no discussion. Committee reports. I had one committee from OJ. I submitted in writing. Yeah, I typed it up, so you emailed that in. So I figured, put it in my form, send it out. So everyone got that as written in the email from Traffic Department Committee. Correct. Yeah. Any other committee reports? Want to bring up stuff? We'll wait till January for diversity council, yeah. And then nothing really with the chancellor search.
No, there's nothing. Yeah, there's not.
Seeing no additional committee reports, move on to the next item for good of the order. Have anything additional from the floor?
Random point of clarification, sorry. You'd mentioned like the decals, and that actually would be committee conversation so I'm sure that you guys talked about that, but versus the union, because that doesn't really fall under contract necessarily, but something for y'all to talk about. Not that we can't request that bargain, but it makes more sense for that to go to the committee first.
At the point I did bring it up, and it was something they did not talk about, or we didn't talk about in this meeting, but it's something we can talk about in the next meeting.
Okay. Yeah. True. Anything else for good of the order? I will offer one thing. I was making some quick notes about, we had a presentation tonight. We had 3 items come from the floor that were all pretty substantive as far as the announcement and keeping persons informed. We had the motion on the item for the Provost and Vice Chancellor of Academic Affairs and that ongoing issue, and then we've had 2 resolutions. One in the support of the Faculty Senate's resolution on the Provost search, and then our funding bill. And that's a lot of business. And so I wanted to take a point. Some of us have already left. And I'll make a point to communicate that in the follow-up email to the meeting. But that's a lot of business, and that's not a lot of easy business. And I can't say thank you enough to everyone. We're doing really good work and doing it effectively and with great care. And so that I'm pumped. It definitely means a lot to me. So thank you. So it makes it enjoyable. With that, there's nothing further for good of the order. I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion. So a motion seconded. Motion seconded. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye. If there's pizza left over, make sure to grab it on our way out.
5 minutes over. Yeah. The first time I
Anybody's
had to
sign up for
Next meeting will be January 21st.
And I'm bummed. Can I just name some of my voice? It's next. Yeah. Oh, and we never did.
won't have any,
It's like not even the.
I'm marking.
Well, it was technically,